Hey guys, welcome again to the Tea with Nikki. I am drinking the same matcha green tea latte that I was in the last video because I literally just went to record another video right after. This is not as lighthearted as the last one that I did. And I want to talk about the issue of white supremacy in the military and how that conversation is becoming more and more unavoidable, especially after the attempt to take the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. It was basically everyone that involved there was it was an act of treason, basically. And there was a pretty big amount of like a veteran crowd there, like a lot of some active duty, I believe, but also some veterans. And I'm talking like officer veterans, lieutenant colonel veterans, motherfuckers that really should have fucking known better than to put themselves in that situation. One of the terrorists that got killed was an Air Force veteran. And I want to talk about this because I am a former Air Force officer, and these are things that black Air Force officers that are in really can't talk about because they are in, and there are certain risks that you take when you bring up things like this. But now that I'm out, I can say literally whatever the fuck I want, so I'm going to use that privilege to talk about this. Race has always been a topic that's shied away from in the military, especially by leaders, especially by officers, especially by white officers. One of the cop-outs that they like to use is like, you know, we all wear the same uniform, and so it really doesn't matter. We are all one color. We all wear one color, green, because we wear the uniform. I don't see color, which, by the way, is still actually a very racist thing to say, because if you don't see color, which you fucking do, unless you're actually colorblind, because you do fucking see color, then that basically means that you are choosing to completely not acknowledge the experience of someone that is a different color than you, or that is a certain color, because we do have different experiences in this country based on what we look like. So by you saying that you don't see color, it basically means that you're not willing to hear any other perspective other than, you know, a centrist perspective, or you're just not comfortable hearing about how maybe a black person's experience in this country is worse and just different from yours. I was in a forum with a few pretty high-ranking individuals for an event this summer when talking about this subject. And the general that presided over it, he decided to, and we were talking about race, and the general decided to end the whole thing. He wanted to end on a good note, and so he told some story, some bullshit story about some two kids that were like, you know, different colors, and they got along. They always love to do that because you can't just like call a spade for what it is. You can't leave any of these forums without making white people feel better about themselves. And so he ended with that story. And he asked if there was any other questions, and me, like I said, being out of the service, I fully take, you know, I take every opportunity I can to speak out. And so I was like, yeah, I want to say something. That's a really nice fucking story, because he ended it saying like, we need to focus on like the good stories that come out, like the good stories about, you know, getting along and race and everything. And I was like, with all due respect, sir, that's kind of bullshit to focus on the good stories, because the good stories, yeah, that's really nice to make white leaders like you feel better, but the reality is that there are black airmen suffering like every day, wondering like, what can I do to get myself out of this hole? They're being discriminated against. Like, I have been in that situation, and I remember just being, you know, feeling so alone, feeling so helpless. And if you want to hear my story, you can go to the playlist that's on my YouTube channel to hear all about that. But having been in a really bad situation related to that, like just feeling completely hopeless and feeling unseen. And I told him, I was like, and airmen like that, are unseen go unseen because leaders like you choose to not pay attention to the bad stories because it doesn't make you feel good about yourself. For some reason, like it just doesn't give you the warm and fuzzy. But we don't need to look for the warm and fuzzies here. We need to look for the bad stories. We need to look for the airmen that are suffering. We need to look for those airmen that are possibly, contemplating suicide and experiencing mental health issues possibly because of what they're going through. And he kind of stumbled over his words after that, and he's like, no, I get it. I was like, yeah, okay. Everyone in that forum seemed to be like, interesting. It was really funny. But that's kind of how the discourse in race goes in the military, in the Air Force at least, and I'm sure it's the same or similar in the other branches. The case this summer with Vanessa Guillen, the young Hispanic woman that was killed brutally from my hometown, Houston, at Fort Hood. And it was very apparent that, that story would not have gotten as much traction if her family hadn't pushed on social media and really spread the word. And so many stories like this, like they get on social media, but they also get lost. And so maybe Vanessa's family was actually lucky, because I think there's probably a good chance that her story would have gotten completely lost in the sauce. And so thank God they got some sort of, justice. And obviously it won't bring their daughter back. Finally, her entire chain of command was fired. But for those of you who don't know, like in the military, getting fired is not the same as it is in the civilian world. In the military world, getting fired doesn't mean that you get fired from the service. It just means that your problematic ass gets moved somewhere else where you could possibly hurt someone else. Or maybe, you sit a desk job, for the remainder of your career or whatever, but there's still a potential for you to hurt somebody because you're still in. So, and also as this stuff was going on with, Vanessa and Black Lives Matter, an article came out that basically said that, from the Air Force Times, that said that the Air Force does disproportionately punish black airmen more than white airmen. Not to say that every single one of those black airmen that got punished didn't do something to deserve that punishment as it goes, according to the UCMJ, but just saying that that's saying that there's a lot of, white airmen that instead of getting punished to the same extent, got a slap on the wrist, while a black airman basically has, they have no second chances. They don't get the benefit of the doubt. At all. And so and studies came out from the Air Force themselves saying that yes, this is a problem. And honestly, it's hard being black in uniform, especially, I won't say especially as an officer, because that's the only perspective I have because I'm an officer. But there was another article that came out basically saying that, it's really hard for black officers to rise in the ranks because whether you want to believe it or not, like there is a good old boy system, and, a lot of success in a lot of arenas is due to like who you know and who you're buddy with, who you have a lot of things in common with. And if for some reason like you don't jive well with your white colleagues or whatever, and you're not able to play the game or like water cooler talk or whatever the fuck, then there's a big chance that you won't rise through the ranks. And that is a big problem, with black airmen in general, but also like black officers, which is why there aren't a lot of black generals out there. Because these systemic things, these systemic social constructs keep us from moving up, keep a lot of us from moving up. And I have to say, like the last few months of being active duty was really hard for me, because it's illegal when you're a military member to speak out against the president. And obviously I fucking hate Trump. He is a goddamn terrorist and white supremacist. And but we weren't really free to say that. We weren't really free to talk about how we felt. And so a lot of us just clammed up and didn't say anything until we were like in circles that we trusted, like friends and stuff. And even so, you still have to be careful because you never know who else is around and, you know, wants to shit on your career. But, you know, just hear, but people that do support the president, like I said, conversely, if you do support the president, obviously there is no problem with being able to say literally whatever the fuck you want. And so I had to walk around hearing MAGA, you know, build that wall and all this shit and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff that people just felt really, really emboldened to do and say. And it was very, very uncomfortable. And honestly, it took a few months for me to even phase out of that military mindset of not being able to talk about things like this because I was still really scared. Needless to say, I'm getting closer to that point where I don't fucking care. Coming up on almost 2 years out of the service, that's crazy. But it still took me some time to phase out of that. And there have been so many white supremacist incidents by armed forces members over the years, all the time. And it seems to be something that gets, you know, swept under the rug every fucking time. Oh, you know, it pops up that an airman or an NCO is related in some hate group thing or some white supremacist event or group or something, and it happens so much more often than you think, and it seems to just get pushed under the rug, which is not, like I said, it's not surprising. It's not surprising because it seems that white members get the benefit of the doubt more often than black members, which obviously is evidenced in the study that the Air Force did and released, saying that black airmen are punished disproportionately to white airmen. The Air Force did issue a statement basically saying that, you know, I can't remember exactly what it said, but regarding the events on January 6th, that it was basically like not okay. I want to say maybe act of terror or just like a criminal, basically. And that they don't stand for it and everything, and that, you know, the armed forces members are to, you know, defend the Constitution first and foremost. That is the oath that we take. And that's all well and good and cute and shit, but it really didn't say anything about what they're gonna do in the future to combat this in their ranks, I noticed. And I think a lot of people noticed that it really didn't say, it really wasn't very action or, what's it called? Solution oriented. Really, there was no action item. Like, what are you going to do? Because you know that there are white supremacists walking around you in the armed forces. There were so many veterans there on January 6th. Like, it's really becoming a topic that cannot be avoided in the military anymore. No matter how uncomfortable it makes white leaders, even the well-meaning ones, it is not something that you can ignore anymore, especially as these people are literally like causing us to be on high alert from now until the inauguration, with possible, more like, coups and like dangerous demonstrations or attacks rather, projected to happen in major cities and capital cities leading up to the inauguration. That is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And like I said, it's really becoming something that white leaders cannot shy away from anymore. The Air Force can't shy away from that anymore. They can't shy away from unconscious bias, and how that plays a role in disproportionately targeting black airmen and, just airmen of color in general more than white airmen. Like, this is not something that they can run away from. Because it's going to continue to become more evident. It has become more evident over the past year with Black Lives Matter, with Vanessa Guillen's case, with that study coming out saying that, this does happen. and just more of this stuff is just revealing. It's just revealing a lot, and especially on January 6th, I think revealed that this kind of behavior to some extent is tolerated in the armed forces, or this kind of ideology, and there needs to be some sort of action item where the armed forces in general, each branch, and I'm talking Air Force because that's where I came from, the Air Force needs to fucking address how are they gonna weed these motherfuckers out, and how are they going to how are they going to establish that this is not okay. And you will not be given the benefit of the doubt if you are seen to be, associated with these organizations, because they are hate groups, they are terrorist groups, they commit acts of terror. They did on January 6th. That is not acceptable. I was honestly really surprised at the amount. I was kind of surprised at the amount of veterans that took part in the events of January 6th, but also not so much, because when I was an officer, as an officer, you have to be careful about everything you do and say on social media and even in public. And I was extremely careful, but I also saw a lot of my white counterparts getting away with so many things that I'm just like, there's no way, especially white male, particularly white male. And I just like, man, and I would just look and see like, there's no way I could get away with doing that. Or they would do something that's very irresponsible and just get a slap on the wrist, where I knew that if that was me, I would be shit out of luck. So it really doesn't surprise me that they thought that they could do this on January 6th and just get a slap on the wrist, or honestly face no consequences, to be honest. And so really it isn't that surprising for me, but it does make me very, very angry, because as an armed forces member, veteran, active duty, you should know fucking better. You fucking know better. And so I feel no sympathy for those people who participated in that dangerous uprising, the attempted coup. I have no sympathy for them, because they're very, very well aware of the UCMJ and whatnot, and they should have known better. So basically, in closing, if there are any Air Force leaders watching this right now, man the fuck up. Like, grow a pair and start talking to your airmen about this. Start talking to your leaders about this, and start actually addressing this in your workplaces, because this is some bullshit. And you might be surprised of the stuff that runs under your nose because you're not paying attention, either willfully or unwillfully. And your black and airmen of color, they are suffering. They are suffering, and they are not going to benefit from you not wanting to see color, or not wanting to talk about it, or giving the same tired excuse that we all wear the same uniform and all of this shit, and wanting to, feel comfortable all the time, because it's not a comfortable conversation. This is 400 years plus of mental conditioning for all of us that we have to undo. We all have to, and it's going to take a long time. But it has to start sometime. It has to start somewhere. And it really should fucking start with you, because these men and women signed up to give their lives for their country, and the least that you could fucking do is protect their motherfucking lives and actually give an attempt. Actually give a fuck. That would be fucking nice. So if there's any of you guys watching out there, like grow a pair. Get over yourself. Talk about it. Okay? Get over the fact that we all have unconscious bias, and even though you might not consider yourself to be a racist, there will be racist thoughts that pop up in your head. They will, because we've all been programmed to think of black people and people of color as a certain way. I know this because even racist things pop up into my head because we've all been programmed this way. Racist things pop up in my head about my own people, about myself. I've been programmed to hate myself. That shit sucks. I tell you what, we can't help it. We can't help it. All we can do is identify them and analyze them and change how we manifest, change how we behave in this world, and that's the only way that things are gonna get better. If you get the fuck over yourself. Get over yourself. Come to terms with the fact that you're going to make mistakes, and come to the terms with the fact that there's probably some really fucking questionable shit that you have done, and you've probably hurt some people in the past, and there's probably nothing you can do about it. There's probably no way to apologize to those people or to atone for it, but you can control what you do from here on out. But the longer that you wait to do that, the more you're just kind of a useless piece of shit and are not doing any good for the airmen under you that are suffering. So, with that saying, that's this episode of The Tea. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel, and follow me on all my other social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. And if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about, as usual, leave it in the comments for sure, because I always check the comments. I try not to too much, but I do check them. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and I'll see you next time.